Hey guys, welcome to another edition of the Monday Morning Tennis Rant. I want to start off by giving a shout out to the game of tennis. Isn't this the greatest sport in the world? Hear me out. We had a phenomenal French Open Championship. Then a few weeks later, we have Wimbledon. And you would think that we get a couple of weeks off with nothing exciting happening, but right after that highly anticipated Wimbledon final between Djokovic and Alcaraz, we have 4 men's tournaments and 2 women's tournaments with so many great matches. And in this particular week, I was inspired to go out there and train. And who inspired me? This guy. I'm wearing a Rafa hat because Rafa this week showed how much he loves the sport. I watched every single match of Rafa in Bastad, and it started off with the greatest matchup in tennis history, Nadal versus Borg. Just that name in itself got me so excited for that first match. And Leo Borg, he's on his way up in the ranks. He's a great player. But of course, as you know, his dad, one of the legends of the game. And it was cool to see Nadal versus Borg in the first round. So Nadal wasn't at his absolute best in this match. And in the second round, he faced Cameron Norrie, who is a tough player who doesn't get enough credit, a former top 10 player, Indian Wells champion. Very physical player that makes you work for every point. And I thought in this match, Rafa played the best tennis in this particular tournament. He had some trouble in the second set going down 1-4, but he comfortably beat Norrie 4-4. And then in the quarterfinals, he played Navone, who is a top clay courter. I talked about this guy in some of my previous rants during that South American clay court swing prior to Indian Wells. And this match, Nadal versus Navone, was one of the most memorable Nadal matches that I've ever seen. It was the second longest best of 3 Nadal match of all time. I think he played Djokovic once and that match was longer. But this was an absolute battle. And it showed how much Nadal loves the game of tennis. Think about it this way. Nadal won the tournament in Bastad 19 years ago in 2005. It's crazy to even think about that. 19 years of professional tennis, except 1 year where he was injured, he was at the very top. In fact, he has the record for most consecutive years in the top 10. I believe it was 17 years in a row in the top 10. So 19 years later, there is Nadal, not looking quite the same that he did in 2005, still fighting, still fist bumping. And what is he really playing for at this point? Well, he's playing for the love of the game because he has all the titles that he could have ever dreamed of. And for him, the perfect place to retire was at the 2022 French Open where he beat Djokovic. At that particular time, he was the leader in the Grand Slam race. And after he beat Ruud in the final, Nadal was walking around on crutches. So he wasn't doing well physically. And that was the perfect time for Nadal to call it quits. He would have done a Sampras. I always thought that Sampras had the best retirement of all time, winning the US Open unexpectedly and just calling it quits. Rafa could have done the same thing at the 2022 French Open. But he didn't quit. Why? Because it's for the love of the game of tennis. And this match by no means was a high quality match from Rafa. There were patches where he was playing extremely well, but for example, he went up 5-2 in the third set, and then in a matter of 10-15 minutes it was 5-all. So even Nadal admitted in the press conference that his focus was not always there. And this is a good thing to hear, that even if Nadal has issues focusing in a match, we shouldn't feel bad about a lack of focus in tennis matches. Tennis is a hard game. But he miraculously made it through this match after 4 hours. And I was very worried that Nadal was going to pull out. And he did pull out of the doubles with Ruud, but he ended up playing a Croatian player from Split. And I never seen this guy play before, and I wanted to scout a little bit for Rafa. So I watched the quarterfinal match between Ajdukovic and Montero, and the first thing that I noticed was that Ajdukovic was running around his forehand to hit backhands, and you don't often see that on the ATP Tour because most players have a better forehand than backhand. And I gotta tell you, the way Ajdukovic was hitting backhands against Nadal, right now I would put him in the top 10 in the world for best two-handed backhand. He was hitting two-handed down the line winners off his left foot from outside the court. He was doing jumping backhands a la Safin or Rios. He was ripping the backhand cross court down the line with a tremendous amount of speed. The guy has an incredible backhand, great player. And Nadal, very similar to the Navone match, wasn't consistent. So he would play well in certain patches, but then he would play poorly. So for example, in the first set, he didn't play well, lost that 6-4, played a little bit better in the second, and then I thought, okay, Nadal is on fire. He goes up 3-0 in the third set. I thought the match was over, and then 5 minutes later, all of a sudden it's 3-all in the third, and we have another battle. But Nadal managed to come through that one, and here he is in another ATP final at the age of 38, 19 years later again in Bastad. And I was very excited for the final. I thought that Nadal had a good chance to beat a tough player, Nuno Borges, and right away from the start, I could see that Nadal's movements were slower than usual. He wasn't as explosive. I think that he emptied his tank in those matches he had to play on consecutive days. And Nadal tried. Nadal always tries his best, but he just didn't have enough energy. And really, there was no chance for Nadal to win this match. He was simply exhausted from all those matches that he played previously. So the Olympics is starting next week, and I think Nadal's chances to go deep in that tournament are going to be slim, because you're going to have the best of the best there. Alcaraz, Sinner, Djokovic, Zverev. And I don't see how Nadal in his current form can beat these guys. But honestly, as a Rafa fan, it really doesn't matter to me. Just seeing him compete after having hip surgery is inspirational, is motivational, and I love it. Yes! And look, I'm not very good at doing the Rafa forehand. I can do it in defensive situations, but as an aggressive shot, I don't have enough acceleration to be able to pull that shot off, and those forehands were very weak. However, if you pay close attention to the racket that I'm using, it's the #1 recommended racket from my recent white racket reveal video. Is the Yonex E-Zone 100. So I got a video coming out soon. I tested the racket along with several others, and I'm going to let you guys know how it went. There were some other tournaments going on. The tournament in Newport, which will be a challenger next year, it's been downgraded, which is a shame. There's a lot of other tournaments that the USA has lost recently, including the Atlanta tournament, which is going to be gone, and one of my favorite tournaments, a club where we used to play college matches in Memphis. That tournament hasn't existed for a while. So it's sad to see these tournaments disappearing, and I like the Newport tournament. I like that extra week of grass court tennis after Wimbledon, and it was fun for me to see who was going to show up. And Opelka came back. Out of nowhere, he reached the semifinals, lost very easily to Mickelson, who is a great player. He won the tournament last year and had match point again in the final against Giron, but couldn't get it done, and Giron ends up winning his first ATP Tour title. Berrettini won the title in Gstaad. He beat Tsitsipas in the semifinal. Tsitsipas is out of the top 10. He did play extremely well in Monte Carlo and Barcelona, but then dropped off even on clay. He didn't play well on grass. So looking ahead, Tsitsipas needs match wins to be able to get back to the place where he used to be. I feel like it's only a matter of time until Berrettini is back in the top 10. He is playing well. He can play on all surfaces, clay, hard court, grass, indoors. Very complete, very dangerous player. One of my all-time favorite tournaments to watch is Hamburg, Germany, especially when it was a Masters 1000. In fact, this is the first Master Series tournament that Federer won, and there were some great Nadal-Federer matches. It was a real shame that this tournament was replaced by Madrid, a tournament that I really don't like that much. Why? Because it's altitude and Nadal doesn't like it, okay? So I would have preferred that tournament to stay in Hamburg. So Hamburg was downgraded to a 500, and they changed the date for it to take place after Wimbledon, which is terrible, and it means that a lot of the top players aren't going to show up. However, Zverev, being from Hamburg, shows up almost every year, and he won that tournament last year, which meant a lot to him. And this year, he finds himself in another final and plays a tough Frenchman called Arthur Fils. And Zverev wasn't in top form the entire tournament, and in this match, it seemed like he was the one defending and Fils was the one dominating. However, Zverev still came close to winning this match. It was 5-all, 30-40 on Fils' serve, and Fils does an underhand serve that looks like an ace, but it ended up being a little bit wide. And this irritated Zverev very much because he ended up losing that break point, losing that game. And at the changeover, there was an exchange between Zverev and Fils. And I'm not going to talk about the underhand serve again. I've talked that subject to death. However, I will say that people were wondering why Zverev was upset. Well, it's pretty obvious why he was upset, because Fils did an underhand serve. Zverev then held serve and got into a tiebreak where Fils played incredible and won the tiebreak very easily. I will say that these two guys made up in the trophy ceremony. They were laughing with each other, spraying champagne on each other. And Fils did say that the reason why he did an underhand serve was because he was cramping. There were also two women's tournaments. Diana Schneider won Budapest. She's a top player. I think she has a good chance to get into the top 10. She's a lefty, very dangerous player. And in Palermo, an amazing final between Zheng and Muchova. Both spectacular players. Zheng's forehand is my favorite on the WTA Tour. She hits it so heavy. She has such good rhythm, timing, and the forehand just looks so clean when she hits it. And Muchova, on the other hand, is one of the most versatile players on the WTA Tour. This was a tough 3-set match. Zheng came out as the winner, winning 6-2 in the third, and defended her Palermo title from last year.